Look, there's something twisted about how the world treats quiet men. You're sitting there, minding your own business, building something in silence, and everyone assumes you're broken. They think silence means defeat. You know that moment when you're in a meeting and some loudmouth takes credit for your idea? Or when your ex posts about her amazing new relationship while you've been grinding in silence for months? Everyone's laughing at the quiet guy, the one who doesn't fight back, the one who just disappears. They think you're weak. They think you're done. What they don't realize is that your silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. It's the most sophisticated form of warfare they'll never see coming. Has it ever crossed your mind that maybe the guys everyone underestimated are the ones who end up owning everything? The world has this backwards idea that if you're not constantly proving yourself, you're not worth much. That if you don't react to every slight, every mockery, every dismissal, then you must be soft. The reality is much more uncomfortable than that. Most men are so desperate for validation that they'll burn themselves out trying to prove they matter to people who don't give a damn about them anyway. They're playing a rigged game where the house always wins, and the house is other people's opinions. Here's what really happens when you get rejected, mocked, or written off. Your ego wants to fight back immediately. It wants to prove them wrong right now. It wants to show them who you really are. But that immediate reaction, that's exactly what keeps you trapped in their game. Ryan Holiday wrote something that hits different when you really get it. He said the ego is the enemy because it makes us reactive instead of strategic. When you're reacting, you're not building. When you're defending, you're not advancing. When you're explaining yourself, you're giving away your power. You're handing over the keys to your empire before you've even built the foundation. The men who truly win, not the ones who look like they're winning on social media, but the ones who actually build empires. They understand something the rest of us miss. Silence isn't the absence of power, it's the accumulation of it. Every moment you don't waste defending yourself is a moment you can spend building something that will speak for itself. Every breath you don't use explaining your vision is a breath you can use executing that vision. Every ounce of energy you don't burn on convincing skeptics is energy you can channel into proving them wrong through results. Viktor Frankl survived the worst humanity had to offer and came out with something profound. He said we can't always control what happens to us, but we can choose our response. That choice, the space between stimulus and response, that's where your empire gets built. Not in the noise, not in the arguments, not in the desperate need to be understood. In the quiet moments when everyone thinks you're down and out. In the silence when everyone's moved on to the next topic. That's when the real work happens. That's when strategic masculinity takes over. There's this pattern you see everywhere once you start looking for it. The men who get mocked, rejected, written off, they have two choices. They can spend their energy fighting for recognition from the same people who dismiss them, or they can disappear and build something undeniable. Most choose the first path because it feels better in the short term. It feeds the ego. It scratches that itch for immediate validation. But the second path, that requires something most men don't have anymore: the ability to delay gratification and trust the process even when no one believes in you. The uncomfortable reality about building an empire in silence is that it requires you to die to your need for external validation. And most men would rather stay weak and validated than become strong and misunderstood. They'd rather have a dozen people tell them their small idea is great than have one person doubt their massive vision. They'd rather be understood and mediocre than mysterious and powerful. Because mystery requires patience, power requires sacrifice. And most guys aren't willing to pay that price. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this concept 2,000 years ago, and it's still relevant today. He said, "How much trouble he avoids, who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself." Think about that for a second. The Emperor of Rome, arguably the most powerful man of his time, understood that authentic authority comes from within. It comes from building something so solid that external opinion becomes irrelevant. Not ignored, not dismissed, but genuinely irrelevant because your results speak louder than their words ever could. But here's where most guys mess this up completely. They think going silent means becoming cold. They think building in private means cutting off all human connection. That's not strategic silence. That's just emotional shutdown. Strategic silence is different. It's choosing not to waste energy on conversations that don't build anything. It's choosing not to defend yourself to people who've already made up their minds. It's choosing not to explain your vision to people who can't see past their own limitations. There's a massive difference between strategic withdrawal and emotional retreat. Friedrich Nietzsche had this idea about what he called the overman, the person who creates their own values instead of accepting society's values. Most men are so busy trying to prove they fit society's definition of success that they never ask if that definition is worth pursuing. They're grinding toward goals other people set for them, seeking approval from people whose opinion shouldn't matter, building empires that look impressive from the outside, but feel empty on the inside. The men who build empires in silence aren't trying to prove anything to anyone. They're trying to build something that matters to them. The recognition comes later, if it comes at all. But by then, they don't need it anymore. Here's the first uncomfortable reality that most men can't handle. Most of your emotional reactions are just programming. You've been taught that when someone disrespects you, you need to respond immediately. You've been taught that when someone doubts you, you need to prove them wrong right now. You've been taught that silence means weakness. But think about the most powerful men you actually know. Really powerful, not just rich or famous or loud. They don't explain themselves to everyone who questions them. They don't defend every decision to every critic. They move in silence because they understand something crucial. Explanation is a luxury you can only afford from a position of strength. When you're building, when you're grinding, when you're in the messy middle of creating something meaningful, that's not the time to be explaining yourself. That's the time to be working. The results will speak louder than any explanation ever could. But it requires something that feels almost impossible in our culture: the willingness to be misunderstood while you're building something undeniable. It requires you to be comfortable with people thinking you're crazy, lazy, delusional, or irrelevant while you're in the process of proving them spectacularly wrong. The second uncomfortable reality is that your need to be understood is actually holding you back. Every minute you spend trying to make people see your vision is a minute you're not spending building that vision. Every conversation where you're defending your choices is a conversation that isn't moving you forward. Every explanation is energy that could be execution. The men who build empires understand that being understood is nice, but being right is better. And sometimes being right means letting people think you're wrong until the results prove otherwise. Most men are trapped in this cycle where they start building something, face criticism or doubt, and then spend more time explaining what they're building than actually building it. They get so caught up in managing other people's opinions that they lose momentum on the thing that actually matters. They become professional explainers instead of professional builders. The empire gets built in the space between other people's doubt and your own certainty. Not in the conversations about it, not in the justifications for it, but in the actual construction of it. The third uncomfortable reality is that your silence threatens people more than your arguments ever could. When you stop defending yourself, when you stop explaining your moves, when you stop seeking approval, that's when people realize they don't have power over you anymore. And that terrifies them. A man who doesn't need their validation is a man they can't control. So they'll mock you, dismiss you, write you off as irrelevant. They'll try to bait you back into their game. Let them. Their opinion of you isn't part of your business plan. Their understanding of your vision isn't required for your success. If you don't learn to move in silence, you'll spend your entire life trapped in other people's games. And the cost of that isn't just success, it's your soul. Here's what happens when you stay reactive, when you keep explaining yourself, when you keep needing everyone to understand your vision. You become a slave to every opinion, every criticism, every doubt that someone else has about your life. You start making decisions based on what will shut people up instead of what will move you forward. You start building things that look impressive to others instead of things that actually matter to you. I've watched men destroy their own empires because they couldn't handle being misunderstood during the building phase. They had something authentic, something powerful, something that could have changed everything. But when people started questioning it, doubting it, mocking it, instead of doubling down and building in silence, they spent all their energy trying to convince the doubters. And while they were explaining, their competitors were building. While they were defending, their opportunities were disappearing. While they were seeking validation, their empire was crumbling. The most insidious part of staying reactive is that it feels righteous. It feels like you're standing up for yourself, like you're defending your vision, like you're fighting for what you believe in. But you're not. You're giving away your most valuable resource, your attention, to people who don't deserve it and don't want to understand anyway. You're letting other people set the agenda for your life instead of setting it yourself. You're playing defense when you should be playing offense. Here's something they don't tell you about building an empire. The people who matter will recognize what you're building without explanation. The people who don't recognize it either can't see it because they lack the vision, or won't see it because they're threatened by it. Either way, your explanation isn't going to change their mind, but it will drain your energy and slow down your progress. It will turn you from a builder into a salesman, and salesmen don't build empires. They just sell other people's creations. The men who never break through, who never build anything lasting, who never create anything meaningful. They're usually not lacking in talent or vision or even opportunity. They're lacking in the discipline to build without validation. They need constant feedback, constant encouragement, constant proof that they're on the right track. But empires aren't built with constant encouragement. They're built with constant work, most of it done in silence. Most of it done when no one's watching. Most of it done when no one believes it's going to work. There's this moment that every empire builder faces. It's the moment when everyone thinks you've lost, when everyone thinks you're done, when everyone thinks you were just another dreamer who couldn't deliver. That moment is the test. Most men break at that moment. They can't handle being seen as a failure, being seen as delusional, being seen as someone who talked big but couldn't back it up. So they quit, or they change direction, or they start explaining why it's taking longer than expected. They start making excuses instead of making progress. The men who build authentic empires, they disappear at that moment. They go silent. They stop explaining, stop defending, stop trying to manage other people's perceptions. They just build. And they stay silent until the building is done and the results speak for themselves. They understand that the most powerful response to doubt isn't an argument, it's achievement. The most devastating comeback isn't a clever comeback, it's success that makes the comeback unnecessary. So here's what you do instead of defending yourself. When someone challenges your vision, you say something like, "I can see why you'd think that." And then you change the subject or end the conversation. When someone mocks your progress, you smile and say nothing. When someone tells you your idea won't work, you say, "Maybe you're right," and keep working on it anyway. You're not agreeing with them. You're just refusing to enter their frame. You're refusing to play their game. You're conserving your energy for the work that actually matters. Stop defending yourself to people who've already made up their minds. Every minute you spend trying to convince someone who doesn't want to be convinced is a minute stolen from your empire. Their doubt isn't a problem you need to solve. It's information you need to ignore. The hardest part about this isn't the silence itself. It's trusting that your work will speak for you. Most men have been conditioned to believe that if they don't actively defend their reputation, it will be destroyed. But reputation isn't built through defense. It's built through results. When you stop wasting energy on managing other people's opinions and start channeling that energy into your work, something interesting happens. The work gets better. The results get bigger. And eventually, the results become so undeniable that the people who were mocking you start asking how they can get involved. They want to be part of what you're building. They want access to your success. But by then, you get to choose who gets access and who doesn't. You need to disappear from spaces that drain your energy. This one hits different because it's not just about avoiding negative people. It's about recognizing that some conversations, some environments, some social circles are designed to keep you small. Even the positive ones, even the ones that claim to support you. If you're constantly having to explain yourself, constantly having to prove your worth, constantly having to defend your choices, you're in the wrong room. The men who build empires understand something crucial about energy management. Every social interaction either adds to your energy or subtracts from it. Every conversation either moves you forward or holds you back. Every relationship either supports your vision or undermines it. There's no neutral. And the fastest way to build an empire is to ruthlessly eliminate the people and places that subtract from your energy. Not because you're antisocial, but because you're strategic. This doesn't mean becoming antisocial. It means becoming selective. It means choosing your battles instead of fighting every battle. It means saving your energy for the conversations that actually matter, instead of spending it on the ones that just feel urgent. Most men are so afraid of being seen as antisocial or arrogant that they stay in energy-draining relationships and wonder why they never have enough fuel to build anything meaningful. Instead of explaining what you're going to do, create systems that do it automatically. Instead of convincing people your idea is good, build a prototype that proves it works. Instead of defending your business model, show them the revenue. Systems don't require explanation. They require results. And results don't argue with anyone. They just exist, undeniably and powerfully. The most powerful thing about systems is that they work whether people believe in them or not. Gravity doesn't care if you understand physics. Compound interest doesn't care if you believe in investing. Your empire doesn't care if people believe in your vision. It only cares if you build the systems that make it inevitable. When you focus on building systems instead of building consensus, something shifts. You stop needing permission from other people to pursue your goals. You stop needing validation from other people to know you're on the right track. Every day you spend explaining is a day you could spend building. Every conversation about your vision is a conversation you could spend improving your vision. Every moment defending your choices is a moment you could spend making better choices. The men who understand this don't avoid all conversation. They just make sure the conversations they have actually serve their empire instead of just serving their ego. Let your results create the narrative. This is the hardest principle because it requires the most patience. Instead of telling people what you're building, just build it. Instead of managing expectations, exceed them. Instead of crafting the perfect pitch, create something so undeniable that it pitches itself. The narrative will write itself when the results are impossible to ignore. Most men are so impatient for recognition that they announce their empire before they've built it. They want credit for the vision before they've proven the execution. They want respect for the potential before they've delivered the results. But empires aren't built on potential. They're built on progress. And progress happens in silence, in the space between what you say you'll do and what you actually deliver. Progress happens when no one's watching, when no one's cheering, when no one believes it's possible. When you let your results create the narrative, something powerful happens. People stop questioning your methods because they can't argue with your results. They stop doubting your vision because they can see what you've built. They stop mocking your silence because your silence has produced something undeniable. The conversation shifts from "can he do it" to "how did he do it?" And by then, you're already building the next thing. When you master strategic silence, when you learn to build without seeking permission or validation, something fundamental changes. Not just in how others see you, but in how you see yourself. You stop being someone who needs external confirmation to know he's on the right track. You become someone who creates his own validation through his work. You become someone who trusts his own judgment more than the crowd's opinion. The men who've made this transition, you can spot them immediately. They don't need to tell you they're successful. They don't need to defend their choices. They don't need to explain their methods. They just move through the world with this quiet certainty that comes from having built something authentic with their own hands. They've proven to themselves that they can create value, solve problems, build systems that work. And once you've proven that to yourself, other people's opinions become interesting but irrelevant. There's this moment in every empire builder's journey where the switch flips, where you realize that the people who were mocking you 6 months ago are now asking for advice, where the people who said your idea would never work are now copying your methods, where the people who wrote you off as irrelevant are now paying attention to everything you do. But here's the thing. By the time that switch flips, you don't need their validation anymore. You've built something that validates itself. The paradox of strategic silence is that the less you need people to understand you, the more they want to understand you. The less you need their approval, the more they want to give it. The less you explain yourself, the more intrigued they become. Mystery creates value. Scarcity creates demand. And a man who doesn't need external validation becomes instantly more valuable to everyone around him. Not because he's playing games, but because he's genuinely focused on building something bigger than their opinion. Have you ever noticed how the most respected men in any room are usually the ones saying the least? They're not performing for anyone. They're not trying to prove anything. They're just there, quietly confident in what they've built and what they're building next. They've learned something that most men never learn, that authentic authority doesn't announce itself. It just exists. It doesn't need to be explained or defended or justified. It simply is. When you stop wasting energy on managing other people's perceptions, that energy has to go somewhere. And where it goes is into the work itself, into better systems, better products, better results. The empire that gets built in silence is always stronger than the empire that gets built for applause, because it's built for the right reasons, not to impress anyone, but to solve genuine problems and create authentic value. The transformation isn't just professional, it's personal. When you stop needing other people's validation to feel good about yourself, when you stop needing their understanding to feel confident in your choices, when you stop needing their approval to know you're on the right path, that's when you become truly free. Free to build what matters to you. Free to pursue your vision without compromise. Free to disappoint people who don't matter, while delivering for people who do. This is what strategic masculinity looks like in practice. Not the loud, performative masculinity that needs constant validation. Not the toxic masculinity that needs to dominate everyone in the room, but the quiet, confident masculinity that builds empires while everyone else is arguing about empires. The masculinity that creates value instead of just claiming value. The masculinity that solves problems instead of just complaining about problems. Look, here's the bottom line. You can spend your life explaining yourself to people who will never understand you, or you can spend it building something they can't ignore. You can waste your energy defending your vision to critics, Or you can channel that energy into making your vision reality. You can stay reactive and spend your days responding to other people's doubts. Or you can go strategic and let your results silence every doubt. The men who build authentic empires, not just wealth, but influence, impact, legacy, they all understand something fundamental. The empire gets built in the quiet moments, in the spaces between other people's opinions and your own work. It gets built when you stop caring about being understood and start caring about being undeniable. It gets built when you realize that your silence isn't surrender. It's the most powerful statement you can make. Your silence says you're not here to perform for anyone. You're here to build something genuine, and you trust your work enough to let it speak for itself. The choice is simple, but it's not easy. You can keep playing the game where you need everyone's approval, where you explain every move, where you defend every decision. Or you can start playing the game where your results do the talking, where your systems create the proof, where your empire speaks louder than your words ever could. What's it gonna be? Are you going to keep explaining yourself to people who don't matter? Or are you finally going to disappear and build something that does? The world doesn't need another man with opinions. It needs men who build solutions. It needs men who create value. It needs men who understand that the most powerful empires are built in silence by people who care more about results than recognition. If this resonates with you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications because we're just getting started. There's another video coming up that's going to challenge everything you think you know about success. Make sure you watch it. Until then, stop explaining and start building. See you in the next one.